Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast. My name is Michael Greenwood, and with me is my good friend.
Trent Matthew.
Thanks, and we'd just like to invite you to this next episode. We're going to be talking about getting help. And just for those who might be new, we have a particular challenge in life, and that is we are attracted to children. We are pedophiles. However, we have determined that we will not act on those feelings. We're not going to ever hurt children. In fact, we believe that's always wrong, always harmful to kids, and definitely not what God wants for our sexuality. So, with that said, we have an important topic today. What do you do when you need help? Trent, I imagine you'd agree with me that pedophilia can be very isolating.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's one of the biggest problems. You just can't talk to anyone about any of this stuff. At least that's how it feels. For a lot of people who live in Western countries, there is this aura of secrecy about this kind of stuff. But yeah, there is actually help out there. It's hard to get into that mindset where it's not like everyone is out to get me. There are places where I can go which are safe and people that I can talk to. Part of the challenge, though, is finding those people, especially when you're a captive to shame. You're carrying this burden and you're carrying it all by yourself.
Yeah.
And yet in scripture it says, bear one another's burdens and confess your sins to each other. Our understanding of this issue at the moment is such that it makes it very, very difficult to actually open up. There's still this stigma about this issue, and a whole bunch of scenarios could just go straight through your mind, right? Being vulnerable, it's like, am I about to get reported, accused? And that's certainly been the case with me.
Yeah, and the sad part about it is more than some challenges, it's like you so desperately need help. It's like the isolation can tear you apart. Hell, and temptation too, like if you're left alone with all your thoughts, like we don't want to ever cross the line with those feelings and hurt kids or something. That's so terrible. It's so awful. It's like more than anything, it's like you need help. You need someone. You need some support, and it's so like fearful and terrifying. Like, well, who are you gonna tell? Like,
Yeah, at the same time, it's like, man, I wish someone else could relate to this stuff. It's incredibly isolating. So we have some options for getting help. We can either open up to close family or friends, a pastor or mentor, or a professional therapist. Now, Michael, I take it you've had more experience with sort of opening up to your pastor and to family and friends. Would you like to talk a bit about what that was like for you and some of the fears and the hurdles and stuff that you had to go through?
yeah, thanks, sure. First, let me say to anyone listening, apologize if our sound quality is not so great. Trent and I live on different parts of the globe, and for whatever reason, the internet's not on our side today. Early on, in my early teens, I started recognizing I was attracted to kids, and I felt like I really needed to get some help and tell some folks, and so I told my mom, and I eventually ended up telling my father and some other family members. I went on to feel like that this was something I needed to get out. I told a teacher, uh, some other friends, and looking back now, I shudder. Like, I realize I could have got so hurt. I think I was not discriminate enough of who I told about this struggle. I've heard horrible, horrible stories where people have told others in their lives, and it's like a noose around their neck, like the knowledge that they're attracted to kids ruins whole places for them, like their school setting or their church setting where it gets spread around, and it just becomes a terrible thing. And I thank God, by the grace of God, that didn't happen to me. But I shared with several people, but there was a positive thing too. Like, it was nice having some friends that I told, and fortunately they were real friends, so they actually cared about me, and uh, and my family fortunately actually cared about me and weren't looking to do me in. They were on my side, so that worked out good. Trent, did you ever share with friends or family?
I did share with, uh, well, I have some regrets about sharing with some people in my family. I only told my mom and my dad, and I regret that, to be honest, because then I think there was a time later on where he used that to try and blackmail me,
Oh wow.
and that was in front of a lot of people, and that was a
Oh.
really scary situation. So you have to be,
Oh wow.
super super careful. Yeah, yeah. So
Hmm.
um, yeah. So I shared with my dad. With um, I shared with only a couple of friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think it was like two or three friends, and
Yeah.
they've all been really good. But it's not
Cool.
something, that we talk about on like a regular basis or anything, and it's not like they're asking me, "Hey, how you going with this whole underage attraction thing?" Like it's just something that I've just been able to just to sort of get it off my chest, and that's just been it. Like to still be accepted by them is such a powerful thing, and
Wow.
that's really nice. Yeah.
That's so cool.
But at the same time, like I would not tell all my friends, and sometimes it's like you gotta realize it's like, is there anything to be gained by
Mm-hmm.
telling this person about my vulnerability in this area? And quite often, like 99.9% of the time, the answer is going to be no. So,
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well, first, it's a heavy load to carry this knowledge of something that you have these
mm-hmm.
feelings and this attraction that's just part of your brain makeup. It's a heavy load for you and I to carry, and it's a heavy load for somebody else to carry. So, like what you said, it's like first of all, if it's not going to be like destructive to the relationship. So that's kind of like a rule of thumb is you don't want to tell somebody if it's going to be destructive to the relationship. Like they can't bear the weight of it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's okay because they're just not there yet. Like they haven't thought about this stuff in a critical way, and so for them, there's a lot of emotional stuff tied in with that. And like for us who struggle in this area, this is something that we have to be okay with. Like we have to be okay that other people can't actually talk about this stuff and gonna have to live with. But that's okay. Like,
Yeah. And some people are more kind of maybe naturally okay being loners, or that way. I don't need a lot of friends, or I don't need to share a lot. But I know other people who really sharing with others is a big thing for them. And so this barrier of tension trying to share this struggle is a hard thing for them to carry. So, one thing we advise them is like don't share with other people unless they truly have your best interest at heart.
yeah, it's basically it.
And it's like it's not really something you can just share for the sake of sharing. Like you can get really hurt. And at the same time you really need to get it out to somebody, like somebody who will care about you as a person. It won't damage the relationship for them to know, and that you can trust them. So the one person I suppose in my life, well, my wife knows. Um, Also, I've told my pastor. After a couple years of getting to know my pastor, I was really blessed that he's a guy who I trust, really cares about me. It's a small church, so I trust him to not blab about it. I trust him that like if I was struggling, I could go to him. And every once in a while I do go to him and be like, "Hey, man, yeah, things are cool." Or he'll kind of walk up and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And we both know what we're talking about. So I don't that for me, him in my life, knowing that, and then well, you Trent, because I talk to you, and then my mom. We don't. It's not like we ever talk about it much, but it's there, and I could if I needed to. So that's kind of like enough for me for my needs to be able to have others carry the weight of this. Who have you shared with? Are you in a comfortable place? Like, do you have that support?
Well, yeah, I'm still in a place where it's like there are some people in my world where it's like sometimes I'll think, yeah, well, they're completely trustworthy, and then at other times I can be like, no, I can't trust them at all. So I'm still really struggling with that black and white type of trust thing. and not really realizing that trust has this level, that it's a progressive thing, that it's like you can trust someone a little bit and then a little bit more and then a little bit more. And so I think this is why I think it's a good idea that if you are going to come out to someone, that it's good to sort of come out in stages. Like, so saying things like, so instead of saying, yeah, I struggle with this, right? You could say, you know what, I struggle with my sexuality. And that can mean anything. And generally, like if you say that, I mean, I can think of very few where people would actually be aggressive towards you if you said that you struggle with your sexuality. So yeah, a fairly safe first stance, and then you can keep on going from there, and maybe you can trust them enough to say, hey, just wanted you to know that I struggle with these unwanted thoughts towards people that I shouldn't think about in that way, right? I'll be like, yeah, it's who doesn't struggle with unwanted thoughts, right?
So you're kind of testing the water, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. You just test if it's safe to just go in a little bit further, and I think that's usually a good place to go. Like that's usually a good way to go about it.
Sure.
But man, my experience though, I mean, when I first found out about myself, I did not do this. Kind of like you, I felt like I had this massive burden, and I just had to just get it out there. Like I just had to
Right.
tell everyone. And it's funny because looking back, I think I was really driven by a sense of honor and dignity. Like I couldn't stand the idea that other people would think that I was a bad guy. So as soon as I found out about myself, I was like, no, I'm going to do the honorable thing, and I'm going to get help, and I'm going to do the therapy, and I'm going to be good. That was my driving force, and it was it was
Right.
it was like pretty serious. Like it was like I don't care if I end up being locked in some insane asylum or wherever they lock. I mean, this is like even though I hadn't done anything wrong, I
Right.
was just so. And then I found out that all these therapists were really, really unhelpful, and that I didn't get locked up because I hadn't done anything, and they just sort of put me on this list. And
Yeah, so for people who haven't listened to Trent's story, his story is he describes everything he went through with that on another podcast. You can find it. It's called Trent's Story. But just in brief, you were overcome knowing that you had this struggle. You hadn't hurt a child or anything. It's just you felt this. You went to the hospital to get help and ended up you were put on an offender registry, mandated.
I've never been on any kind of registry like that. Kind of like what you guys have in the States. I understand you've just got one list, whereas I think here in Australia we've got
Right.
multiple lists. So I was on the like level 1 list, the list that's like, hey, we're not so sure about you, but we're going to put you on this list just in case you might do something because we've received information that you struggle
Yeah.
in this area. And so it's like, anyone who's
Hmm.
anyone can make it on that list, right?
It's like Minority Report, right? You've seen that movie where the preemptive.
Like seriously, it's like that. Like it's very, very dangerous if you're a guy and you're working with children in any industry really. What you have to do is if you want to do anything, you need to clear what's called a working with children check. And I found these checks in basically any environment, like environments where there aren't even any kids, because they just don't want anyone who's slightly suspicious, because, people who might be attracted to kids are just plain old gross and disgusting when we have to kick them out of society and hurt them as much as possible, sort of thing. I mean, I was coming across this check in, office jobs. I was feeling very frustrated because I felt, and in some ways, like even today, I still feel under the thumb of the system.
And so you went and did something that I never had the opportunity to or never ventured into is you tried to get help from professional therapists.
Yes, yes.
So maybe you could share a little bit about that journey.
Sure. I went through like 6 or 7 therapists. Like most of them were just not helpful. Like I felt like I was being led. Just so you know, one of my other struggles is same-sex attraction. Now, because I'm a Christian, I've decided not to get a boyfriend, and I've decided that I want to, stay in church and remain with my community. But one of the worst therapists I saw was a guy who's like, oh no, you should just leave the church and go and be gay, and you should go and get yourself a nice cute boyfriend, and all this other stuff will go away. And I was like, what? And
Right.
and, and I left that place feeling so isolated and so upset. And I didn't feel listened to, so I found it really hard. Just because someone says that they're a Christian doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily treat you nicely, especially if you open up to them about your underage attraction. So you have to be really, really careful. So yeah, but there are a lot of ways you can prepare for therapy.
Now, you have had some now positive experiences with it. Like, what were the qualities that made for the therapist that could help you, or and what actually on your journey has helped you deal with this struggle of underage attraction?
Right, what was the first question?
Sure. Okay, now I know from us talking that you have had some positive interactions and help from a therapist.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So you can definitely get help. There certainly is help out there, but I think there's a lot of things you can do. So first thing that you should probably want to do is just prepare yourself for therapy. Save up the money that you need. Go and get yourself a mental health plan if you live in Australia. That might help. Make sure that you also have realistic expectations. When I was trying to find a therapist, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to find a psychologist and they're going to totally understand my issue and everything's going to be great. And no one did. So make sure you have realistic expectations. Finding a therapist that is good for you can take months, and in my case, it was years. Make sure you're prepared to travel. Try and turn it into a day out where you go and get some seafood or something and then do your therapy session and then come back on the bus or whatever. I don't know what you do.
make it positive.
Yeah, just make it a positive experience. You don't have to sort it all in one day.
So, now what sort of conversations with the therapist have been helpful for you?
Therapist will basically just bring into words the emotions that you're feeling under the surface that you aren't able to fully articulate. They'll give you plenty of space, they'll keep the conversation flowing. It will kind of feel like they can read your mind. And that's just because they're sensitive to all these little that you give them. I can tell you what a good therapist won't do.
Hmm.
I met one counselor who worked for the government, and she just talked and talked and talked and talked the whole session and felt like I didn't really have any room to say anything. Stay away from people who like to give quote unquote helpful advice or just people who hold you at arm's length. I saw this one guy, it's like there was no therapy relationship happening. It kind of felt like I was just there because I had to
Hmm.
be. Stay away from therapists who tell you their problems. Believe it or not, these therapists actually exist. Though I'm not sure if you can call them therapists.
Makes me want to go out and find a good therapist. Now, just to kind of pull it all together, a bit of a summary, it's like if you're attracted to minors, it's just a huge weight and it can be crushing at times. And when people have struggles, you reach out and you ask for help. Now, unfortunately, the reality of this struggle is because of the concern for children, and rightly so, there's a lot of tension, and sharing with others can be problematic. You can get really hurt. But it's still essential that you find someone who you can share with, whether that's a family member, a friend, a spiritual leader, a mentor, or therapist. It can be done. And some general rules of thumb are you want somebody who genuinely cares about you as a person, that they're willing to discover who you are in the midst of all the challenge, and then somebody where you sharing with them won't damage the relationship. It's not something that's going to be an elephant in the room permanently. So, with that in mind, also, Trent and I are available. If you want to talk with us, you can contact us through the website, our email, which is support@christianpedophile.com. We answer those emails. Do you have any finishing thoughts?
Yeah, just always remember to pray as well and ask God to lead you to the right person, that He would be with you throughout this whole process. Everything is in His hands. He's sovereign, and He is the one who coordinates all this stuff.
Great. All right. Well, thank you for listening to our podcast. We'll look forward to talking to you next time.
See you later.